Welcome to Worth Live, and thank you all for joining this week's episode of the Next Normal series on what the future of sports could look like for women. Firstly, I hope you and your loved ones are keeping well during what has been a momentous week, but also what continues to be a challenging time for so many people. I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our special guest today, Cindy Parlow, Olympic gold medalist and president of US Soccer Federation, Patty Hubbard, co-founder at BrandForward, and Kathleen Entwistle, managing director and private wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hey, Juliet.
Hello.
Hello. Our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are female leaders, as well as investors, entrepreneurs, and corporate leaders who want to leave a positive impact on the world and to help create a more inclusive and equal economy and society for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy this session and find it valuable. Forward thinking is the essence of this series, The Next Normal, where Worth looks ahead at what the world looks like in this new environment that we're now living in. 2020 was a tough year for live sports, but the future of women's sports is looking bright. In 2021, it's projected the women's sports will pull in record revenues of nearly $1 billion. So we're thrilled to be joined by industry experts, Cindy Parlow, Patty Hubbard, and Kathleen Entwistle as we discuss how sports for women in particular is changing coming off the pandemic and what the governing bodies of sports have planned for 2021. A few housekeeping rules: be sure to change your chat to all attendees and all panelists, and please do share any comments or questions with us. We'll weave those into the conversation as we go, and we'll also leave some time at the end for any questions that you have as well. But we do want it to be a conversation, so please do share your comments and thoughts with us. And let's get started. Firstly, a personal check-in with you all, and I'd love to hear from you briefly about your background. You're all connected to sports in some way, but actually from very different perspectives. And so, Cindy, let's start with you, because you've had a phenomenal career, and please do share a bit about your background and also kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I grew up in a big family. I have 3 brothers, and I was the only girl, so the annoying younger sister who wanted to do everything my older brothers were doing. And thankfully, one of the things they were very engaged with was sports, and specifically soccer. So I got an early start in sports, and was able to continue that through college at UNC and then on to the national team, as well as professionally. I played for the US Women's National Team for 9 years, in 2 World Cups and 3 Olympics. So some of the highlights of my career were definitely serving on that team and being around those women and those amazing leaders that I think the current team has carried on. I mean, look at Megan Rapinoe, Carly Lloyd, and all the great things that they're doing now. So I love that what the team's doing now and how they've carried that on. And now I coach. I'm president of US Soccer, and I do a lot of work with Goals for Girls, which is a nonprofit organization that teaches leadership and life skills, mostly in India and South Africa, and the slums of India and the townships of South Africa.
And Cindy, just talk a little bit about, when did you first kick a soccer ball?
Well, because I had older brothers, so I think I got a little early start. I learned how to walk with a soccer ball at my foot. That's how my older brothers decided I needed to learn to walk.
Wow. And how come it was soccer as opposed to basketball? Like, what connected with you with the sport?
Well, I played a lot of sports growing up. Don't tell anyone, but basketball was my favorite. I mean, there was just something about basketball that I loved because it didn't come naturally to me. I was constantly learning. Coach would ask me a question, Cindy, what should you have done there? And I would have no idea. But on the soccer field, it was different. I just knew things just came to me. I understood it intuitively. Obviously, I still made a ton of mistakes, but when I did, I knew what I should have done. And so obviously I was better in soccer than I was in basketball. And I'm definitely a land mammal. I was not very good on the swim team. So soccer was the sport for me.
And how old were you when you joined the national team?
I joined the national team when I was 17. Yeah, so I literally spent some great formative years on that team and learning from the great leaders of Julie Foudy, Carla Overbeck, Mia Hamm.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us, and we're thrilled to have you here. Patty, I'm going to come to you next because I know that you work with a lot of athletes and a lot of female athletes. It'd be great to hear a bit about your background and how you became involved in this space.
Absolutely. It's a tough act to follow, Cindy, but I was also the youngest of 4. So there's a theme there, I think, when you have to fight for the ball out in the backyard. But I grew up playing every sport as well, went on to play field hockey at Providence College. And I really feel like sport set me up for, being in a passionate career in an area of purpose. And my career has largely been in the sports and entertainment business, largely on the brand marketing and experiential side. And in the last 5 years, I left a big agency holding company and decided to pursue the area of professional athletes, really with the idea that I felt like 90% of the athletes out there, including a lot of Olympians and Paralympians and female athletes who give up so much to compete in the Olympics, I felt like they were not being properly supported in their journeys. And so we started BrandForward and largely support of those athletes who don't have full marketing and brand teams around them, and understanding the power of their platforms and the power they can have off the field as well. So I felt like, for me, sports set me up for the rest of my career. And I feel like for an athlete, being an athlete is only one part or one chapter of their journey, and they have so much more to offer. And we often hear about the hard landings that athletes can have when they transition out of being an athlete. And we really work hard to ensure that they maximize not only their playing experience, but their experience off the field as well. So they're better set up for the future and have a positive impact on the world in the way that they want, and feel like they're supported to do that.
Thanks, Patty. And do you represent athletes only in the US or internationally?
Primarily in the US, starting to expand globally because of the work I'm doing with global brands. And so I feel like, there really is some momentum right now with brands wanting to work with athletes to come together to support their message, right? Like, there's so much that's happened in the last year where it makes sense for brands and athletes to come together to tell their stories and share their messages on how sport can be an accelerator of positive impact.
Thank you. And Kathy, welcome. It's great to see you. And I think you're obviously in the sort of the wealth advisory space, but I know Connect at Morgan Stanley has quite a big presence in the sports and athlete space as well. So it'd be great if you could share a bit about the work that you do and the firm does to support athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Juliet. And so Morgan Stanley has a whole area at the firm specifically dedicated towards sports and entertainment. So anyone that is involved in athletes or entertainers, anyone that's involved in those businesses, to help support them through their financial journey, which is really, their life journey in a sense. A lot of times people look at money and they see it as this big number, and they don't understand how to manage it or how to take it throughout their whole lifetime. Or again, as Patty was saying, the branding piece, what the other opportunities are. And the fact that athletes are taught from a very young age, I think, to be like the whole person and how they can complement and work with other people, both on the playing field and off the playing field, in a like sort of team themed environment. So Morgan Stanley has a whole program around this. We have a lot of clients that are athletes and entertainers, and we do a lot of work with Sandra Richards, who leads our sports and entertainment area, and she's fantastic. So we've got a lot a lot of resources that we bring to the table for those clients. And just like other clients that come into money suddenly, the ones that do, a lot of times people don't know what to do with that. So we help to make sure that they have trusted professionals and resources to help guide them through that. And then as Patty was saying as well, for those that aren't going to be, the top, 30 athletes in the world, with multi-million, billion-dollar deals and all sorts of opportunities, we also want to help guide all of those athletes to put their best foot forward in every way possible.
Thank you. I'd like to start with like a brief step back on the history of women and sport and a brief background on that. So because I think women have continuously made strides in sport, and I think it wasn't until 1900 that women were allowed to compete in the Olympics, and only 22 women were allowed to participate out of 997 athletes. Whereas fast forward to the 2016 Olympics, 45% of the athletes were women. What do you think that shift says about women and their future? And how would you say society views women's sports differently now than it did, say, 20 years ago? Cindy, I'd love to get your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, so I think 20 years ago, people were just waking up to the fact that women played sports and that it was entertaining. That was around the time when the 1999 Women's World Cup was happening, and people just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. They didn't really know what they were getting into. They knew there was this big event going on. The media was covering it. It was gaining steam as the event progressed. But they really didn't have a passion for women's sport yet, a large majority of them. And there was still kind of this undercurrent of how the women's sport is different than the men's version of the same sport. We would get things like they can't jump as high, they can't run as fast, or kick the ball as hard. And I think the views have changed now. I think we're seeing that, yes, women's sports may be a little different than the male version of it, but they're just as great and beautiful and entertaining. And I think also corporate America is realizing the importance of women's sports and the marketability of the female athletes and the exponential growth potential that women's sports has.
And do you notice a difference between, I guess, the mindset or the sort of the sense of achievement you felt you could have as a young girl versus those girls that you work with now?
Yeah, I mean, I am so excited. I mean, whether it's the young girls I'm working with now, or I look at our U.S. women's national team now and the opportunities that they have available to them that weren't available to my generation. It's so exciting to see, and we're making progress. But unfortunately, we aren't there yet. We still see disparities between the men's and the women's sport. But there are some encouraging signs, and the gap is closing. So I think that's great to see.
Do you see, Cindy, too? I'm sorry, Juliet. Do you see, because it's something I've noticed with COVID, actually, I almost feel like it's a positive. 2020, I believe, we're going to look back and see it as a positive for women's sports. And I think that's because we have more people that have had the opportunity to view women's sports while they're home. And I think also all of the racial injustice, situations that we've dealt with for decades and that were really highlighted last year gave women in sports an opportunity to speak up and share their voice and get a taste of what they're capable of doing with their value and their insights.
No, I completely agree. It's an exciting time right now to be a fan, as if your sport is playing, the access to watching your favorite sport is greater than it ever has been. I think live sports will continue to be the most engaging content out there. But as you've seen, the sport properties are increasingly look to innovate during this COVID time. And can they have unique camera angles, technology integration, player access? And as you said, what has been great about this too is the direct line that these athletes have to their fans via social media. And I think their influence has increased in 2020 because fans are seeking out more access to the athletes. So I think this is net positive for the women's side of the game, especially.
And Kathy, I think you're absolutely right. I think the WNBA is another great example of that, and the work that Kathy Engelbert has done with the players. Like and I think the WNBA have always been very active in that social justice space, but it's sort of come out in a really positive way.
Well,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Patty.
I was going to say it started with leadership, and I think having those female leaders in those leagues made a huge difference, right? I think the agility and the nimbleness that they have to know and understand to be able to adapt the way they did this past year, and being really resourceful and proactive and putting health first in a lot of cases, and also just really finding alternative ways to get viewership and accessibility and getting these athletes out in front. I mean, I think we should be really complimentary of what they were able to do and how they reacted, probably better than some of the bigger leagues because they had to, and because they were more nimble, and the athletes put the product and the mission first versus themselves, which I was really impressed with.
And Patty, how have you seen brands respond to the shift in the perception of women in sport over the last 10 years?
Well, I think even in the last 2 years, right? So you're looking at the brands and how they are leading with purpose now versus it's about, it's about stakeholder capitalism versus shareholder, right? So they have to not only answer to their shareholders, but they're now going to answer to consumers who are demanding it. And they're going to answer to, the advocates. People are choosing brands that stand for something more. If you're a team selling tickets or sponsorships, they want to support leagues that have a larger purpose, and NWSL and the WNBA are very great models of that, right? And so brands are stepping up, and the ecosystem around these female sports are stepping up finally to say we are going to support this because of not only the positive sentiment and the need to, as brands, stand for racial and social justice, but also it's a great product. So I think it's just been really a good intersection of things coming together to kind of set momentum in the right direction.
And do you think women's professional sports are still undervalued in comparison to sort of the level of valuation that male professional sports bring for investors and society?
Yeah. See, I don't know if undervalued is the right word. I would say that they're just at different stages of where they're at.
I like that better. That has a different vibe and tone to it, and it gives more of a positive outlook of where we can be.
Yeah, I think it's just getting started. So
just getting started.
Finally have the media, they're awake, the brands are awake, and now we can look at now how do we move forward in a way that creates a more honestly an ecosystem around this financially that makes a lot of sense now.
I want to bring up too, just from a leadership standpoint, it's what, here we have, Cindy, we have Kathy, we have leaders who are not only really good at what they do, but they really care and they have a purpose and passion behind it, like you were saying. So I would be remiss if I didn't, bring up yesterday and the fact that we have our first female vice president of the United States who has a diverse background and represents a lot of different areas that are important to us, right? So we can have just this whole diverse outlook and viewpoint. But the fact that you're starting at the top and trickling down this passion or purpose, I think is going to make a real difference. And Cindy was mentioning before our talk today a little bit of what she was doing, but I think, Juliet, if it's okay with you, I'd love to hear from Cindy about how she's making a difference in the world that she oversees.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're referring to the youth engagement. So I coach youth soccer as well as do the work with Goals for Girls that I mentioned earlier, where we teach leadership and life skills to kids mostly in Africa and India, in the townships of South Africa and the slums of India, because we know all the great things that girls growing up in sport gain and all those life lessons that they learn. Now I know they're not all going to make the women's national team and they're not all going to become professionals, but they take the skills that they learn on the soccer field or in the basketball court or whatever sport they're in, and they take those into whatever environment that they're doing to be great leaders. And I think the more that we can engage girls in sport, the better off our country is going to be and our world is going to be. I think right now we're kind of focused on that elite athlete in this conversation, and brands engaging with the elite athletes and investing in elite athletics and professionals. We also need to look at how are those brands investing in the youth game too, and investing in our young girls.
And I think the work you're doing is incredible, Cindy. How are you reaching, or how is it being thought about in terms of reaching lower income families and kids in the US as well?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a huge problem in soccer as well as other sports. And I'm working with a best-in-class company to do this national survey and analysis on why minorities aren't choosing soccer. And if they are choosing soccer, why? And spreading it out across the country, because there might be different barriers in different parts of our country. And so just really digging in and diving in and figuring out, okay, what are the problems? What are the barriers and how do we remove them? I think is really exciting and something I'm not aware of a study that's been done on a specific sport in this area. So I'm super excited to dive into that. We're starting it in a couple weeks to see where we can make an impact and grow this game, because if kids don't see themselves as a part of our sport, or if it's basketball or whatever sport that you love, then we all lose out, because we know that sport gives kids, especially girls, so many life lessons that they take into every aspect of their lives to make our country better and our world better.
Yeah, it's interesting from a cultural point of view as well, I think, because soccer growing up in the UK was, every kid had a ball, whether it was in an inner city council estate or on a field, but it was accessible to everyone and it was inclusive of everyone. And it's interesting sort of seeing the growth of in popularity of soccer in this country, and yeah, how do you ensure that it does reach everyone?
Yeah, well, there's also the issue of the pandemic, where kids are dropping off at an alarming rate of playing any sport. I am part of an organization called Plays. We're trying to obviously find funding to support these local clubs, right, that are really struggling through staying in business. And then you have the kids on the other side that, there was an article in the New York Times about how the screen has replaced the afternoon practice. Yeah. And that's going to be an issue for years that we aren't quite understanding yet. And it's, I think the more we can sort of get in front of it and understand, Cindy, through insights and studies to understand what kind of impact is it having. And I think it's something that could be devastating. When you talked about the Olympic athlete and the growth of that, it's, with Title IX in 1972, I think I read 300,000 girls were playing sports. In 2018, it was 34 million. So, that's a huge growth, but we also have to look at, is it growth with all kinds of kids in diverse backgrounds and equity, and ensuring that it's access to more and more kids. And then looking at the pandemic to ensure that we're keeping kids playing and not quitting.
It feels like, I think, to Kathy, your point, despite all of the challenges of the last year, it does feel like an incredibly exciting time for women in sport. And I think, Patty and Cindy, you sort of hit the nail on the head by saying actually the importance of leadership in driving forward this area. How did you, I guess, Cindy, you came as an athlete and you're now heading up the US Soccer Federation. Who did you turn to sort of as a coach and a mentor? Because obviously you know so much about being an athlete, but what about some of the other like business skills? How did you kind of acquire those?
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of work in the boardroom before. I was on the Athletes Council at US Soccer for many years and was on the board there. So I kind of learned the ropes there, but also doing some entrepreneurial stuff here in North Carolina as well as working with Bell Leadership here. And that, I mean, the skills that you learn in team sports, and specifically for me, soccer, they go with you everywhere. It's about bringing people together, listening to people, trying to find out what motivates each individual and putting people in places where they can succeed and supporting them, and empowering people to grow and learn. And so those are transferable to whatever leadership position that you are in. And then obviously I have a lot of great people on the board and working at US Soccer that I am learning from every single day.
And Patty, how much are you educating brands on the importance and growth in this space versus them recognizing it? It feels like you're like the conduit in some senses with the work you're doing at BrandForward.
Yeah, I'd say there's been a real shift in the last year. And I think it really came from a lot of brands didn't know how to react, and they were reactive in a situation around, you know, the pandemic and racial justice and, you know, all of these and gender equity. And they were coming at it in a way where they hadn't talked about it before. So now they're like just putting out statements versus we're trying to educate them on being authentic and being consistent and taking a position, because our future world, these issues aren't going away anytime soon. And to take a position is really important. And then how do you integrate that into your whole organization, right? It's not just through your PR department or your social media department, but how do you as an organization lead with purpose and using sport as an accelerator to do that, or using all that's out there to do that, but in a way that's authentic, because fans are going to know that it's not authentic. And a lot of brands have been called out for that in the last year, which I think is positive, right? I think we're all learning, and it's important to do it in a way that's not reactive, which I think we all saw in many cases.
Patty, are you advising brands on how to position themselves with athletes, or athletes with brands, or both?
Both, I would say both. Brands also, like how do brands work with UEFA, or how do brands work with NWSL, and how do they partner in a way that sort of helps both together in partnership. And I think the sponsorship model is changing as well. And then I'd say, you know, how do brands work with athletes in the right way, where it's less about a social media post, but it's about a partnership long term. And that is also a big shift in the industry that I'm happy to see. And I think athletes are as well, right? Like, I think they want to work with companies that share their values, not just doing a post and walking away.
So much more powerful that way when you're sharing values.
Absolutely.
And Patty, why? Because I know there's been numbers quoted that women's sports going to pull in record revenues of nearly $1 billion this year. Why is that? And is it that brands are wakening up to the fact that actually it helps connect with purpose, and the sponsorship dollars are changing?
Yeah, I'd say that it's a few things. One is there's been some media deals. I think when you're starting here, it's pretty easy to have that type of growth. And now the next few years are going to be probably the more important ones. But I'd say that, you know, the NWSL getting a deal with CBS, but also getting a deal with Twitch is a big deal. Like, there's accessibility being driven by the fans, right? So there's really passionate fans, which means that brands look at that and they say, okay, not only getting the awareness, but we're getting the engagement with fans that are really passionate. And I think as part of it is how we're evaluating that engagement and understanding it's about quality sometimes versus quantity. So, you know, I'd say the number of growth is largely being driven by the media and the brand partnerships still, but I'd say that there's still a long way to go. an opportunity, and the opportunity is there now that the model has been created and proven. It's still 4% of media dollar, 4% of women's sports are being broadcast. I mean, that's a very low number. So we have a long way to go.
And that's actually one of the things I was thinking about with COVID last year, the fact that there can be no, all the broadcasters, no fans. And part of the energy or the excitement of a game is the fans that bring the energy. And one of the issues has been at women's events, there hasn't been as many fans unless it's some major event. Like, for example, Cindy, my 25-year-old daughter went to play soccer with her high school team in Europe one summer, and they had the benefit of going and seeing one of the like the World Cup, female game. Maybe, like, who knows who? I don't know what year you played. You're probably too young for that, but maybe it was your team. I don't know. So it's kind of like exciting for them to have that opportunity. But when you go and you see it, you get that excitement. Now that no one's really been out and able to go and see, maybe, in the next year or two, we're going to start to see more fans at female sports events. And that will also help drive it. I also, I think recently, didn't the NBA bring in the WNBA in some of its media, like television contracts or something like that? So I think the collaboration between male and female sports, would also be very helpful. Like the male sports can help lift the women's sports to the level, that they're at too. I think it's a little bit of everything. Do you guys agree or disagree? Just interested in opinions.
Well, I think the female team is bringing the men's soccer team up. So that's
true. Very true.
Yeah. And
but I don't mean in terms of the actual sport. I mean in terms of the branding and the opportunities that are given to the female athletes. That's what I mean. I apologize. Completely meaning not the talent. I'm talking about opportunities that they're given as a result of the talent.
Yeah. I mean, think off the field, there's so much work it's the men athletes are getting still 99% of the opportunities. And that comes from the storytelling, the social media, like the part of it that is, giving awareness that these athletes have more to share versus just playing their sport. And on the men's side, like, they're creating their own media companies. I know Alex Morgan did as well, but there's a reason they're creating their own media companies, so that they can actually put out there what they want to put out there. And there's big dollars behind that from a brand perspective. So yeah, I think there's a ways to go for the female athlete in what they're doing off the field and off the court, because there's a lot of money there that's being left on the table.
I think another thing that's exciting that we're seeing in the NWSL, obviously we have the best players in the world, but we're also beginning to attract significant ownership groups, like we've seen with Angel FC, a majority female ownership group, including many of my former U.S. women national team teammates. And I think the Angel City is not only an incredible story for the NWSL, it's a great development for women's sport. And so hopefully we can see more of this in the near future.
Yeah.
And is it the Taylor family, the daughters of the Taylor family that in St. Louis, they founded Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but I was interested in the ownership structures as well, and actually some of the owners are increasingly female, which I think should help pull this up as well. Patty, what are you seeing a shift in how athlete, and I'm interested in your experience of this as well, Cindy, but now there are more opportunities for athletes and female athletes to have sponsorship deals, and to your point about brands needing to really connect with purpose but be authentic and meaningful, are athletes now in a stronger position to decide whether or not they want to be represented by that brand or not?
I think so. I think there's still some work to do on understanding, to help those athletes understand what their personal brand is, because the way that I would often approach it is, you have 10 other people on your team. What makes you you on the court versus your teammates? And that's part of your personal brand. But then let's look at everything else you're passionate about off the court. which allows them to intersect more with the brand. And so, like, again, that's the value part of it. That's the passion part of it. Maybe they're interested in cooking, and maybe they're interested in doing a lot of great work in the community. And that story needs to be told in a way that a brand would, right? So there's a whole brand building process that's put in place so that they understand how to intersect on the sponsorship side and the social media side, and where the monetization comes often has to be the back half of the process, but you have to put the work in on the front end, and they don't often get that support through an agent, right? Like, an agent doesn't necessarily know how to do brand building or marketing strategy. And so that's where I think the work can be done to kind of reach a larger number of athletes, to help them to know where to begin, so that they're better set up to understand the monetization in a way that, again, is more long-term and it's more authentic to them. And they'll get better results that way, and they'll and in the long term they'll make more money from their experience, I believe.
And Cindy, have how was that when you were playing and versus now?
Pretty non-existent back when I was playing, but I think it's really something that's evolved more recently, and I think it's a great thing, especially for the female athletes, because they're able to build their brand, and fans are seeking out ways that they can get to know the players that they love better. And so via social media, they're building their brand, and the fans feel like that they are being let in, so-called, to their lives, and have a better understanding of who they are, both on and off the field or court or what have you.
Yep. I still want to see more content, right? I want to see more content out there as well.
And where social media has come into play so much, the fact that you can, follow your favorite athletes on Instagram, and they might start referring to their fans as their community. And then all of a sudden you feel like you're part of something bigger.
Yep. I want to see ESPN do a documentary series on Maya Moore. Like, I don't like seeing The Last Dance and seeing Lance Armstrong and seeing all of that was great. But where are the female athletes in that? So we still have some work to do when it comes to mainstream storytelling and the documentaries, and the fact that there was one around the 1999 team, Cindy, but there was so many other things around that could have been done to tell that story better, and through the lens of some of the players involved. So anyway.
And Patty, do you see technology and the social platforms actually assisting with forcing the traditional broadcasters to cover more stories like that? Because presumably if there is more influence and more community building outside of the traditional means, they've kind of got to look at that and say, okay, well, we should be telling this story.
Yeah, I think there needs to be better support in supporting someone like Maya Moore to tell her story in the way that she wants to, right? And then you can show some of the engagement and the numbers, but it's not cheap for them to film. Like, there's, the NBA players walk around with film crews all day. So there's a reason that content is easier to capture and put out. It's like, it's not like they have the necessary means to go and sort of film all of it. It's hard to do. Easier now than it was maybe 5 years ago. So that's where I'd like to see some of the investment, is more females stepping forward to tell their stories, right? In a way that the men are comfortable doing. I mean, we could say that about business too, right? But it's like just being more proactive on that.
That's an excellent point, Patty, in terms of, I think we still apologize, right? That's an issue, I think. Apologize as women for being successful, for doing better than others. And we're supposed to be like more, stepping back, and to change that messaging at an earlier age. I'm curious for your thoughts, and, Cindy's thoughts, is how do we change that messaging, or how do we get women to feel really, really comfortable getting out there and saying, this is what I'm doing, and this is like how it happened, and be excited about it, and firm and confident.
Yeah, I think that was one of my challenges as a young female athlete, is society was telling me to be this nice, kind, gentle girl. And I just wanted to be this fierce person who wanted to beat everyone. And just trying to navigate that as a youth and not really understanding all the ramifications of it, I think was challenging. And so I actually spend a lot of time with the kids that I coach on this topic, And I'm like, do you apologize for making an A on the last test that you studied all night for? So why are we apologizing for our successes in other areas? And so just giving them the confidence to be proud of their accomplishments that they have made. And I know this has been a constant battle for me personally too, as well. It's like every position or leadership opportunity I get, my first thought is all the things that I am not. I'm not this, I'm not that, I don't have this skill, I didn't go to this school or what have you, I don't have this degree. Before I start thinking about what it is that I do bring to that environment. And I think that's the shift that we need to start having with our young girls, and thinking about what is it that you do bring. Yeah, everyone has weaknesses, but you have amazing strengths as well. And what are those strengths that you're bringing to every environment, and knowing that you are of value regardless of what school you went to, how much money you make, what degree you decided to go into, what sport you decided to go into. So I think these are the shifts that we need to start educating our young girls on.
Changing the stories that we learned growing up, you know, whether we had money or confidence or whatever it may be in advance or not. I think changing that story around our confidence will be huge.
It's okay, and it's okay to make mistakes. Like I coach girls basketball and boys basketball and other sports, but the girls make a mistake, they always say sorry.
Right, I'm sorry. Favorite word. It's terrible.
And I spend 50 times in practice saying, don't say sorry. Like, and the boys
get out of the vocabulary. Just
you know, boys shoot threes all day and they miss by and they're like, whatever, I'll shoot again. It's fine.
I didn't play college sports, but I did play tennis and growing up. And I remember, you know, after I had some kids, I was playing in some adult women leagues, and I was playing against friends on a ladder where you compete, you know, best out of 14 games. And I played a friend and I beat her 14-0. And she said to me, really, you couldn't let me win one game? I said, if I let you win one game, you would have realized you could win more than one. Like, that's not going to happen. But, you know, sometimes I think we have to get that mentality. Like, it's okay to win. Winning it's not a bad thing. Or
I also think that's what has shifted the mindset. I think Rhonda Doyle is sharing some great comments, and how, you know, competition and achieving and winning is really rewarding. And I think if I think back to the 2012 Olympics and then the 2016 Olympics, that for me, I think was when like women's soccer and also the US team really sort of were on the map in terms of you love to see winners, and then you're kind of seeing a female national team win, and it's just like, I don't know, I just think it kind of stirs up.
It's energizing, and it's like the hunt, you know, like it's like the hunt is so exciting sometimes. If you can get excited about the hunt, that's what that is. You're hunting for your win.
Yeah.
And all the tactics that go into it. And it's not just your athletic ability, because of course that's super important, but it's also the way you think strategically that comes to the field. And that is just as important, I think. You guys can tell me that because you were you played college sports.
But it's also, I feel like girls are looking for permission to be great, permission to win. Where a young boy just goes out there and say they're going to win, they're the best player in the world, even if they're not. I think there's just this difference, and then we need to change the mindset of what we're teaching our young girls. They don't need to ask for permission to be great. They just need to go out there and do it if that's what they want to do.
There's an interesting cultural difference as well. We always used to have this phrase in the UK, which is like, it's not the winning, it's the taking part that counts. Whereas seeing my son grow up in the US, it's like, no, it's absolutely about the winning. And it's interesting how that sort of is inbuilt, I think, in boys. And it's like how ensuring, to your point, Cindy, that girls have the same permission to feel like that, and it not come across as arrogant or, you know, too competitive.
Well, I think there's a balance. I think different kids want different environments. Some kids want that ultra competitive environment to test themselves to see how great they can be. Other kids may be perfectly happy playing at a recreational level, and that's okay too. That's fine. But we need to make sure that we're giving the kids the information that they need to be successful if that's what they're choosing to be successful in.
We've got a couple of questions coming through, and a reminder, if you do have any for Cindy or Patty or Kathy, to share them in the chat. So first of all, what advice would you give to young girls that are looking to go to the next stage in sport, and how do they, what advice would you give them to get involved? Cindy?
Is this like on the field or on the court as a player?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the best advice that I unfortunately didn't take as a player was to enjoy the journey, because you're not always going to succeed. And so trying to find the lessons that you can learn through the difficult times, whether it be injury or losing a major game or not making the team that you wanted to make, whatever it may be, to enjoy the process and enjoy the journey. I unfortunately didn't take that advice. I never took the time to slow down and really reflect on the things that I had done and the things that I had accomplished. I was always looking to what was the next thing, what's the next big thing I need to focus on. Be like, we just won the World Cup. Okay, the Olympics are around the corner. Let's start training tomorrow. So I think just being able to sit back, relax, and enjoy your accomplishment and celebrate your accomplishments, as well as think about your failures or your mishaps and how you can learn from those.
There's a question from Malaya Gilbert. Thank you, Malaya. She said, what words do you coach your youth on, or would you share with other women to replace "I'm sorry"?
Oof. Well, don't say sorry. Everyone makes mistakes, and make mistakes out on the court and on the field. Where can you make them? And so for me, on the girls' side, it's about being free and not be so afraid of maybe parent feedback that you're getting on the sideline, or, from your coach, and just enjoy it, not only, if you're in, what I say to my 9-year-old girls is, when you make a mistake, you learn, and it's going to be that way in your life, right? It's going to be that way in business. And it's got to be as a female, we're so afraid to make mistakes. And I feel like so much of that comes from how we grew up. And I'm trying with my own daughter to make sure she understands it's okay to miss a basket or miss the goal, and you just move on, and you move on to the next play. And I think boys are able to do that, and for the most part, girls are not. So if we can just focus on that, and that it's okay, and just move on and learn from it.
It's funny. I have my daughter was playing basketball when she was in 8th grade, and she was going down the court, and her opponent tripped and fell. She immediately stopped and went to help the girl up, and the whole crowd was like, "What are you doing?" And it's just very funny how they all have their own innate sort of ways of doing things, and we have to honor that. We can't force Sarah to be super competitive, because she's not, and the ones that want to be super competitive, we have to give them the space to do that, and the freedom, to go ahead and do what's important to them and compete the way they want to. And I think that's what was challenging, is those mixed messages that we send to these girls of, oh, you need to be the nice girl, Cindy was saying, or, you can be fierce, but as long as you don't step on anyone's toes. So I think it's you have to be just like these athletes that are going through the branding process, and they want to be authentic to themselves, right? With their brands, you have to be authentic to yourself in every way in your life, on the field and off the field. And that, I think, is the key, right? Being authentic to yourself.
Yep. We often say to our athletes, which is for all of us, is we say, build your kitchen cabinet. And so your kitchen cabinet is, who are the people and team around you that you want to have in your journey. And that's relevant for an athlete, and it's relevant for us to understand these are trusted people who you may go to for this topic or this topic, but you need that community around you. And I know that what I've seen with a lot of professional athletes is that they're kind of moving really quickly, and they're moving through, and they're not sort of leveraging their experience, but they're not surrounding themselves with the people that can support them in that. It's your coach, maybe one of them, or your parents, but who else can you kind of have in that journey to support you? That's, sort of part of your kitchen cabinet, we say.
Your personal support system, professionals, and so forth.
Exactly.
What are some of the actions that we can take now to help accelerate this change, and to help accelerate the women in sport space? because we've talked about so many different sort of stakeholders in this. So, you know, you have parents, you have the athletes, you have the coach, you have the brands, you have the owners, and you're all incredible leaders creating positive change for women and for women in sport. What advice would you give to those that are listening, whether they're parents, whether they're business leaders, or actually interested in investing in a club? What actions should people be taking to help accelerate? Patty?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, be a fan, right? Like understand, watch the product, support the product. There's little things that really matter. You know, I try to go on Twitter and follow the people that I feel like are informing and educating me on what's happening in the space. I mean, we're learning from each other, but also watch the games, you know, support the games. Every view helps. And then just understand, you know, as an investor, you want to make sure I mean, there's so much that not only you're in the club, but you're investing in the next generation of athletes. You know, you're investing in that sort of larger purpose of, you know, getting to that 50-50 on pay and participation and all those things that go along with it. That, you know, I'm really excited about where it's going with the Angel Cities, and that it's the leadership group represents, you know, the players, the brands, the athletes, of how they want to support them, as they're more than just an investor, they're a face and they're a personality of the club. And I think that really is a huge shift that we can't discount.
Cindy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to continue to see progress in this area. My greatest hope is that we're not talking about disparities in women's sport in the not too distant future. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. But in order to get there, we need equal investment in girls and women's sports. And then, I mean, I know at US Soccer, we depend on the gratitude of donors and volunteers who commit their time, money, energy, and expertise. So I add on to what Patty said of being a fan, volunteer, get engaged with whatever you're interested in.
And Kathy, from a sort of from a sort of finance point of view, what actions do you think we can take?
I think that we have to encourage conversations around money and value. And we talked about all the other, you know, passions and purpose. So I'm going to go right to the money piece, because money is power, and it gives you opportunities and choices to do things that you want to do. And too often women underestimate their value. So when you don't, you know, take money on the way that you should, or have that relationship with money, or demand that you're paid, you know, a certain way, not demand, but know your worth, know what you're worth, and ask for it. I was speaking recently with a woman who is an attorney, a colleague, a good friend, and she's amazing. I said, I told her a story. I said, there was this fellow who called his good friend who was an attorney, and he said, hey, you know, I have a quick question for you. They did business together, but he was just like, a quick question. He got a, I don't know, $10,000 bill in the mail. He said, we spoke for like 3 minutes. How could you possibly bill me $10,000? He said, that $10,000 is not for the 3 minutes. That $10,000 is for the time and the energy and the education and the experience and the knowledge and the ability to answer that question you had in 3 minutes is what the $10,000 is for. So think about that. I would encourage everybody to think about that you bring a lot more to the table than just that moment in time. And you've got to value that and know your worth.
And final question. Thanks, Kathy. That's great advice. Coming off of 2020, what can we expect to see from live sports this year? And what are you excited about over the next 12 months when it comes to women in sport? Patty, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think some of the things that we saw with live sports are not going away. They're going to be here forever. And I think that was a real positive way to how teams and clubs can how can they engage with fans outside of just the live experience is so important, because not everyone can afford a $1,000 ticket to go to an NBA game or whatever those things are. So I think accessibility through other platforms so that you can engage with fans, and look at the NWSL, like their global audience. They have a global audience now because of their digital solutions that they provided. So I want to see all of that continue and just provide as much accessibility and understanding, like these teams are also being seen on a global level now. So there's an opportunity to be a global brand and a global voice and represent the US, right? Like in a way that maybe other teams can't. And so I'm really excited about what that looks like.
Yeah, and Kathy?
I would just say, I do think that we're going to see more people attending female sports events that we'd seen in the past once things open up again, because I think there's a real appetite that everyone recognizes now and sees the value there. And the more that we see more people attending in person and showing up, then we'll see the sponsors also react to that.
And Cindy, help us close out.
Yeah, I agree with what both Kathy and Patty have said. The one thing that we didn't really touch on in the social media platforms, which I think has been huge for raising the profile of female athletes, is the support that they're getting from the male athletes and using their platforms for good and for social change, and the male athletes supporting the female athletes in a very public way, and at a level that we really haven't seen before. I think we're going to see more of this, which is going to continue to help elevate the women's game.
That's great. We have a session called Audacious Advocates in our Women in Worth Summit in March, and it's how to create them and how to find them. And it sort of plays on what Kamala Harris said in her speech last year around Biden having the audacity to choose her as female VP, and we need more examples of that. So I think that's a great reference point. Cindy, Patty, and Kathy, thank you so much. That was a brilliant conversation. I really enjoyed it. And it's great to talk about women in sports and how we accelerate progress in this space. Please do reach out to us if you want to connect with any of the speakers, and Patty and Cindy and Kathy, wishing you every success with all of your projects and initiatives this year. Thanks also to Kathy Entwistle, Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley, for being our partner for this series. And most importantly, thanks to all of you that joined us today. Thanks for the great questions and comments. We will be sharing a replay of this in our newsletter on Sunday, and we'll also be sharing some content on the discussion as well. If you do have any comments, we'd love to hear them. You can email us at community@worth.com, and then join us next week at the same time, Thursday, Jan 21st at 12 p.m. We'll be discussing why you should consider embracing the anti-retirement movement with husband and wife duo Patty and Millage Hart, the authors of The Resolutionist. Welcome to the anti-retirement movement, along with Kathy Entwistle, where we'll be discussing what it is and why it's exciting and how it can lead you to a fulfilling and engaging post-retirement life. So you can register for that online at worth.com/events. In the meantime, be kind, stay safe, healthy, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Juliet.
you.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks, Cindy.